All right, my friends, it is the last day of 2019. How has your decade been? Man, we started this decade in Texas, in South Texas. Hardly a freaking two wooden nickels to rub together. We ended this decade in Georgia after living in New Jersey. In Georgia, I made more this year than I've ever made in my life by far. And look, I'm not making millions. I don't want anyone to think that. We're still in the 22% tax bracket, right? Yeah, 22% tax bracket. And we have to pay for health insurance because the health insurance stuff has gone through the roof, even though $2,500 you'll save on your premiums. Thanks, Obama. But today's my youngest son's birthday. This is his 12th year, old Liam. And this is my 50th year. All right, so if you take 1 divided by 50, that's 2%. So for right now, a year time for me in my age today is 2% of my life. A year time for Liam is, I think that's 12 divided by 1, or 1 divided by 12 is 8%. Is that right? Yeah, about 8%. I think. Yeah, 8%. 8.833%. So every year of my life every year of Liam's life is 400 times more than my life, or 400%, I guess, something like that. So because Liam, for 1 year for Liam is 400%, is 8.33% of his whole life. 1 year for me right now is 2% of my whole life because I'm that much older. So when you think about it, this last year represented for Liam 400% more experiences than it did for me in the overall scheme of things. I hope that makes sense. Why do I point that out? Is because it's true, as you get older, the years get shorter. And it does, obviously that doesn't mean the time is reduced or anything like that, but you just have more experiences, you have more memories and stuff, and it starts combining stuff. You know what I'm saying? And 2 years ago, not even 2 years ago. Let's see, last is in March of 2018. I quit my crappy old job. So it's been less than 2 years since I've been self-employed. And it feels like a lifetime, but then it feels like just the other day when I was commuting to Portsmouth, New Hampshire. When I was commuting down here to Buckhead for USAA. Man, and it just when I was driving around Virginia, going to West Virginia, for anyone who would talk to me when I was doing 100 cold calls a day, it's crazy. It's crazy how things change, and I'm grateful for every minute of it, man. The funny thing is, they say, I was listening to this podcast, I talked about this on the live stream the other day, by Nick Gillespie from Reason Magazine. He interviewed a guy who talks about the negativity and how we're all just, and you know this, I know this, but we're all geared towards negativity. Like, we look at the past with fondness, but we look at the future with fear, essentially. And the reason for that is because we survived the past. The fact that we can look at the past, we look at it fondly and say, oh, what was I worried about? But we don't know what the future holds. So because that, in the present, you're always scared. But then you look back in hindsight to what was fearsome time. But you're like, man, those times turned out to be good. It was good for me. But then as we sit here today, we don't think about it the same way. We say, oh, I don't know, man. You see what I'm saying? It's because you're always fearful of the unknown, but you can look back in the past and know that you survived, and you're like, I wasn't so bad. But the future could be bad. We're always negative about the future and always nostalgic about the past. It's it's kind of funny. So I share with my kids. I miss Maine, and I do. I'm not moving back there, but I just miss it. And the reason I miss it is because you have nostalgia for the fall. You know what I'm saying? The fall, and the water and all that. You just have this nostalgia. And the funny thing is you can never go home again, i.e. you can never get it back. But then we're watching the video today on the Weather Channel, or yesterday, and there these massive snowstorm up there. And I actually read about some 8-year-old kid getting killed in Standish, I think, on a truck just slid on the ice and ran into this family head first. And it just breaks your heart, man, for that little boy. I mean, it doesn't break your heart for him because he's in a better place, so it breaks your heart for his parents. And here we are, what now? It's 46 degrees right now in Georgia at 10. It's going to be 55 later. And it's easy to be nostalgic for what you survived, but it's awful hard to remember how brutally cold it was. And that's just, I'm using that for an example, because I always say, man, you talk about jumping off the wharf on Peaks Island and stuff like that, and it's always just fun to talk about. But you always forget about the things that, the pain of the long, dreary winters. You just forget about it. Yeah, it's good. It's good to forget about the past in terms of all the negative stuff that you had. It's not as easy as you'd like. I still carry a lot of weight in me about things that happened to me and because of my own actions, which is always harder to put aside. But at some point, you got to move on. And I'm not there. Hell, I'm not there. I still think rich kids. I still think spoiled brats. And I just watched a video yesterday. Some guy. And I imagine a lot of you sometimes when I get political say the same thing. But this guy, and I like his videos a lot. I'm not going to say who. I've mentioned him before. I can tell he's a big lib. And he started talking about, he's a white guy. He started talking about white privilege. And I was like, oh. And my initial reaction is, you got to be rich to talk like that. And this guy went to Iraq. I don't think he was in the infantry, but he's a combat vet. And, who am I to say he's a rich kid? I don't know. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I chastise myself for my first think that just because some guy disagrees with me, he must be a rich boy. You see what I'm saying? Now, at the end of the day, I think the vast majority of white people who go on this way, and this is just my own prejudice, I get it, have never dug a ditch with a shovel, let's just put it that way, who say there's white privilege. But I don't want to be assuming things about other people, I've never had a guy who was my boss at USA. At first I didn't like him, then I think he had a coming to Jesus moment, actually, literally a coming to Jesus moment. He changed, and he's a good guy. I'm not going to mention his name, but he always said, assume positive intent, and he wasn't the best boss, but that was always stuck with me. Assume positive intent. And it's hard to do, though, man. It's hard to assume positive intent. And that's one of my goals, I guess, in 2020, is I want to assume. It's tough, man. When you're born and raised as a cynic, and born and raised that people are always out to get you, that people are always trying to take advantage of others, that rich people this, and you know what I'm saying? That's when you're born and raised like that, it's hard to get over the case that everyone is out to, not to get you like a paranoid, but that everyone's fake, you know what I'm saying? And I think it's tough to say, I'm going to assume positive intent, as if everyone is looking for what they view as the best interest of everybody else. It's tough, but I'm going to try to do that this year. I'm a Jesus lover, man, you know what I'm saying? So you gotta, somebody said, Jesus, I think it's Randy Alcorn in his book, one of his fiction books he writes. And Randy Alcorn had written The Treasure Principle, which is one of my favorite books of all time. Short little read, you should get on Amazon and get through my link. And I get paid, I tell you. 4% commission on a $5 book. I get paid 20 cents. But anyway, Randy Alcorn, he said Jesus died for humanity. But he says, it's not just humanity. Jesus died for that guy. Jesus died for that guy. Jesus died for that guy. Jesus died for everyone. Not just humanity in the aggregate. He died for every single individual out there. So to hate on somebody is to hate on someone who Jesus so loved he died for. So you're going to hate on somebody. I'm talking to myself now, folks. I'm not trying to chastise you. I'm saying to me. Just like I said, I do these things because it's cathartic for me. And I can look back in many years to come and say, man, you're going to hate on somebody, Josh. And when I say hate, look, it's tough. It's tough. But you're going to hate on somebody who Jesus so loved that he was willing to get on the cross with freaking stakes driven into his body and sat there for hours on end in the most excruciating manner, when he could have just said, be gone pain, because he's, literally the Lord. So how can I hate somebody when Jesus so loved that same person as he did me, that he is going to take the stakes, the pain, the agony of being crucified? There's this book called Crucifixion. I've yet to read this. Again, another small pamphlet or type book where it talks about the mechanism of being crucified and how literally the Romans used that because it was so torturous. It was so brutal that the idea of being crucified was, woo! And the reason I want to read this, I've had it sitting there for like 2 years, 3 years now, is because Jesus knew that was going to happen, and yet he still did it. And he didn't just do it for you or for the Christians, he did it for everybody. So one of my goals is to do better to assume positive intent. Financially, I'm putting money every month into my M1 account. I keep doing that. I want to build up my cash account. That's what I'm trying to do. So I'm basically going 50-50, 50 M1, my VBK, and 50 cash. That's what I'm trying to do, just build up cash. Because right now I don't have enough cash. I want to have enough cash so that when Charlotte and I downsize, we can, pay cash money for a new house. And a new house would be, not what we're paying right now. It might be $250,000. So that's my goal. So basically, we got 7 years for Liam graduates, and so I want to have a goal where I have my M1 and my cash account at $250,000 in 7 years. Now, is that likely? I don't know. I don't know. I have no clue. But that's my goal, $250,000. So that way, when we sell, Buckhead beef, look at that. Oh man, when we sell the house, this house here, we can buy cash money for a $250,000 home without having to have a contingency on selling this house, if that makes sense. Obviously, we're gonna have to sell this house because I couldn't afford to carry the mortgage on top. Well, I guess we could. I don't know. But at the end of the day, I don't want to keep this house to downsize, if that makes sense. And then the equity we get from selling this house, we'll use that to basically, I'll be 657 by then. We'll use that to live on, or whatever. I don't know what it's going to be, but we'll use that as our somewhat of a retirement account. So we'll downsize, have no mortgage. So basically 7 years from now, I want no mortgage is kind of where I'm going with that. To buy a house, cash money, to sell this house, use the equity that we built up in that house in order to live on, essentially, until Social Security kicks in, if that makes sense. That's my goal. So, obviously, it's not as structured as I'd like. How much do I don't know. I don't know, because I don't know what my monthly income is. When you're not working on salary, when you're working self-employed, you just don't know. And that's the drawback about being self-employed. It makes it hard to budget, because you're like, what if I don't make any money this month? You just don't know. And some months you make great money, and some months you might not make any money, and then sometimes you might not make any money for a year. And because you don't know, it's hard to budget. But my goal, should it come to fruition, is in 7 years to have $250,000 between M1 and my account at USAA, my savings account, in order to be able to pay cash money for a house for which we downsize, if that makes sense. And we'll see. Now, why not just put everything in the market? Because at the end, because I have a goal that's short term, that's under 10 years. And anything that's under 10 years, you shouldn't have 100% in equities, because you can see what happened. My goodness, this is what I don't understand. 10 years or more is long term. 5 to 10 years is not long term. That's intermediate term. Just look at why they call them intermediate term bonds. An intermediate term bond is basically 7 to, I'd say, 12 years or so. And the reason for that is because the markets on any given decade, you could lose money. It hasn't happened often, but it hasn't happened not often either. If you look at 10 years, all right, so 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, so on. I think there's been 2 of those 8 decades, that's 25% or something like that, where you've actually lost money over the course of 10 years. Now, if you have it rolling 10 years, it's not the same thing, but still, in any given decade, from decade to decade, how we don't, 2009 to 2019 is not a decade. It really is, but it's not the way we look at it. So in any given decade, 2000 to 2010 and stuff, we've had 2 of those years, of those few times that you've actually lost more money than you've gained. So that's a risk. I don't want to take that risk, because I'm talking only 7 years. And in 7 years' time, and I don't know off the top of my head how many times of that did you lose money, I don't know. But I don't want to take it where I have all of my portfolio in stocks where it could drop by 55%, like what happened in 2007 October to March 9th of 2009. From 2000 to January 2000 to basically March of 2003, the market fell again, had that dead cat bounce in the end of 2002, and then it fell right again the beginning of 2003. Now it came back, but over the course of those many years, if that was the time I was trying to save to do what I'm doing now, I would have been in a world of hurt, and I don't want to be in a world of hurt. So anyway, that's my goal for 2020. Is to try to be better at assuming positive intent, and my other goal is to be able to start really building, which I started last year, but money away where I can actually save to buy a house cash money in 7 years once Liam's out of school. What are your goals? Love to hear them, man. Love to hear them. Put them in the notes. Put them in the comment section. What are your goals? What are your long-term goals? What are your short-term goals? Short-term, I mean this year. What are you trying to accomplish in 2020? Love to hear it. And share it. That way other people can get an idea of what other people are trying to do, and they can get an idea too that they might want to use themselves. All right, we'll see you.